Okay. So first of all, I like to thank you very, very much for taking the exhibit to the U Museum, and that we had a chance to see it, especially for me at my age. I'm hitting 97. It was, it is a joy. It is a joy. It gives me a strength. It gives me so much go-go that I start making plans and to continue and so on for the times to come. And with the help of Amit, I will hope to continue. Now, I'd like to put a few words about myself. In 60 minutes, 90 years is very difficult to get into it. However, I'm going to give it a try. I was born in the free city of Danzig, 1926. 3 years later, my sister was born. We were pretty well-off people. We had a wholesale store and another store for perfumery, gallantry, and so on. And that was on the border of Poland, which is in the Baltic Sea. So everything which came into the free port, came to the wholesaler, to my father, and this way he was able to send it to Poland, to Hungary, to Austria, where they didn't have the water connection. And anyhow, we had a comfortable life till 1930 already. In Danzig, the Nazis took over. They took over 3 years before they even started in Germany. And when I was going to school, I think the first grade, then thereafter, the Jews had to be out of school. My father started teaching me at night, and I did that was pretty difficult, but I didn't enjoy it. However, he bought an album with stamps, and with the stamps and the countries and the kingdoms and everything. It made it rather interesting. That I was about 3 years study in the evening with my father on the various subjects. And we're talking now about a 7-8-year-old boy. Most likely, he also taught me Russian, because when I came to the concentration camp and the first prisoner of wars from Russia came in, I had no problems to converse with them. And even today, after 80 years, I speak very freely and I understand. In addition, I speak German, English, Hebrew, and Jewish at the same time. I can converse and so on. So I'm very happy for it. I brought up the education from my father because we're going to continue to it when I got my education in New York. Once Hitler took over Germany, we were forced to leave Danzig, and my father didn't think that will last long. He was a Germanophile and so on. He figured, they're going to make it short. He never thought about the solution and never thought about the dangers the Germans prepared for us and so on. And they said, well, let's go over to Poland, to Lodz, where I have some family. And we just left. We left, we came there. Fortunately enough, we met somebody there who was a landsman from my father's place. His name was Itzhak Katzenelson. He was a very famous poet. He came from White Russia, and he had a gymnasium for rich kids in Lodz. So he took me in there. I made the tests, and I was so advanced thanks to my father's studies that I skipped 2 classes in the gymnasium of Katzenelson. In the summer of 38, I joined the Hashomer Atzayir, which was a socialistic scout group in Lodz. And in the summertime, we had the camp. I went in summer 38. In summer 39, I went with the camp, which was very nice and pleasant. And then 1939, the war started. The Germans marched in. It was the first week of 39. My mother, who was born in Danzig, had a German Danzig passport. At that particular time, there was no letter J, and it was gilted till 1942, like a 5-year passport. My father didn't have that passport, neither did I. And since we both were circumcised, and this way the Germans were able to see that we Jews, we said, maybe we give him a chance that they would stay in Lodz, my mother with my sister, and we're going to a temporary separation. We're going to Warsaw. We came to Warsaw in 1940, and anticipating that with France, with Britain, we never knew about the powerful might of the Nazi army, and we also never knew about their plans of the destruction of the Jews. The ghetto was, we came into the ghetto in Warsaw. People start coming from all over, all the towns, all neighborhoods, and so on. So at times there was about 400,000 Jews in a very small space. And we were fortunate to get a room which was divided into 4 corners. There was a wire on the top, and the linen divided the 4 things. And I was with my father in one corner, and there was a family from Austria, and there was some other people. So the conditions were just terrible. However, with the terrible pressure and all the things which the Germans were doing against us, we were just taking one day at a time and trying to survive and so on. I was fortunately, since I spoke German, taken with columns or workers out of the ghetto to work. So we were sometimes cleaning the tanks, sometimes we were cleaning the booths, sometimes we went other places. And I had always the opportunity to be accepted immediately to go with the group. And that was a great help, because once you were out, you were able to get a piece of bread, home, and so on. They starved us to death, and they started to take out every day about 6,000 people, even more so. That from the 400,000 people till the big selection, there were about half of it. And when the big selection came in, they pulled us out from the factory, which I was also working. And I didn't get the number, so my father was fortunate to get. And for the first time, I came to the Umschlagplatz. It was a tremendous and traumatic experience to be alone. Here you're alone, and they sending you, we knew from the Umschlagplatz, you're going to Treblinka, and from Treblinka, the trains are coming back empty and so on. We knew that from the Polish workers who were working at the train, and they gave us the news about it. So I was still fortunate. So did my father to work in a shop where we were repairing the uniforms, the helmets, and the boots. And if you take a look at the pictures from Michael Smuss, you can see there's one picture which was taken by the Germans where I'm standing next with my father with my hands up in the air. That was taken in 1943, about 2 months before the destruction of the ghetto. They came there on that particular day and asked us to voluntarily to go to the trains and so on. Of course, we didn't, and we stayed in the ghetto. In April 43, 19th of April, that's when the uprising started. There was very, very small group of people on the streets. I was there too. The actually Jews of Warsaw who owned the streets, who owned the buildings, they built hiding places, and they had their families and so on. Since we came from Lodz and so on, we just had no place even to go for hiding. So you automatically you joined the underground and you became a fighter. There wasn't too much of a choice, but so on. And we were able to get all the guns and revolvers from the Italian army who came from the Africa, and they were sent to the Russian front. So at the station, they were giving us the guns, and they were getting for that warmer clothes and underwears and so on. They were freezing because they came in after the corps, like short pants and so on. Outside there was 20 minus, so they couldn't care about the guns, and for us it was very important. In the factory where I was working, we were repairing helmets from all German soldiers who were killed at the Russian front, and they were brought to Warsaw. Then they were brought to the ghetto. We put some 12 and closed up the holes, and then we put paint on it. And the spray of the paint had to be diluted, and that part of the dilution for the paint of the helmets, we start stealing as much as possible. And from that on, we were filling up the bottles for the Molotov cocktails. And from our place, we filled up bottles which were put up on the roofs of all the houses close to the entrance of the ghettos, with the expectation that once they're going to come, we'll be throwing them down, and this way perhaps burning them down and so on. So that was really the great contribution of the little place where I was working. Since I was speaking the languages, I went with the little lorry to the Okenche, which was a place where the planes came in from the east, and they were embarrassed to send their own trucks to pick the stuff up. It was bloody, smelly, and so on, from uniformed, skilled soldiers and so on. So we were the people who had to picking them up. And after the things were cleaned, fixed, repaired, and assorted, and the helmets were sprayed, they came to pick them up. You probably know about the beginning of the uprising, which was the largest, the greatest uprising in this war against Germany. There was nothing before. It lasted much longer than the French army. It lasted much longer than many other places. And it was very rough. In those 7 days, no shower, no food. They were burning up, liquidating one house after the other, full of smoke burning in your eyes. The fear, the smell was terrible. And one building after building, they were taking over until we came up to just about to the end. And like on the 29th, I was caught with the last group of the people. Most likely I was with the last group of sent from Warsaw, and that was the liquidation of the Nalewki Street, and the general troop, he wanted to show off big. On that particular time, he has invited the newspapers from Hungary, from Romania, from Switzerland to show that they finally succeeded to finish the uprising. And it was a terrible sight, because in front of all those houses, the moment the people walked out of the cellars, they were immediately killed. That during that short action, about 12,000 people were killed. They were laying in front of the house. And it was terrible. The smell of gas, the smell of the decomposed bodies, and they got us to 29th. And since the press was there was no killing of the little group of leftover, and they took us to the Umschlagplatz. We came to the Umschlagplatz. That was a station where they put the trains to Treblinka. The next day, they start filling up the wagons. There was not sufficient people because they were counting 100 people to every thing. For that, they had the time. It has to be 100 Jews to go into a freight car. And in order to fill up them, they did get about 350, 360 Jews who were working at the airport, loading and unloading all the freight which was coming through the Warsaw airport. And they disregarded the thing. They just came quick with the lorries, brought them to the train, filled up the wagons, and the train started moving. I was inside the freight car, full. The moment people come in, some of them start dying. There were even families, there were even perhaps fathers who found the Siankali, and they start giving poison to their own children and so on, because we all knew our destination. And then we start talking about, so listen, let's see where the train is going. Who knows more or less the location of the stations which go by? So one of the guys said he knows it. And then on top, on the roof, there were 2 Ukrainians on every roof of the freight car. So they said, who speaks Russian? Bring him up closer to there are 2 big holes for air into the freight car. They were also bringing cows or something before the war and so on. So that's the only place we were getting a little bit air. And they were close with barbed wire. And then they asked who also speaks German to hear German. And I was close to by, so I said, well, I speak German. So they start pushing us closer to the entrance. to the wall where the opening is in the car, and they got step up higher so you can see it. There were already bodies. The bodies they were taking at the edge of the walls of the freight car. So I stepped to one of those bodies, looking out what's going on, holding on with my hands, the wires, fingers start bleeding and things like this. And here you're going to die, gee. And look, you're 17 years of age, and after hectic 7 days was no comparison to standing there. And you can imagine that the hours on that train completely took a part of me that I think at that particular time, my heart became a stone. It became a stone, the same as stone. It was never like this again, you know. And as we were standing, I was standing, and with the other guy too, listening to the Russian talking. All of a sudden, the train stopped, and all three of us, we fell off the body because it was unexpectedly, and then right away came back to it, and then we seen two cars or three cars of the officers from the Air Force, and they stopped the train, and the purpose of it was to get their workers from the airport out from the train. So the train was rerouted, and the only train from, instead of going to Treblinka, he went to a small little place where we got out. It was something, it is documented. It was the only thing would happen, and the only train. We came there, and the German officers, they start calling their names. They got all their people out. And while they were getting people out, there came other German who looked for workers. So they kept asking us what we're doing and so on. So at that particular time, we were doing anything, whatever was needed. And they said, well, we could use some people who work in the machine shop and so on. And for the first time, then I think after hours, my father in German started talking that we all were working and so on. So the guy said, okay, I have here 3 trucks, fill up. I could use about 100 people. And from the people standing there, the train probably was about 1,000 some people. With 100 people, we went on the lorries, and we took us to a camp where they had the building planes. I built planes there. I was that factory till 1944. And in 1944, the Russians started the big offensive, successful, and they closed the camp because they needed the people to work, and there was 100% mobilization in Germany. There were no men working anymore that they could use anybody. So the Jewish worker were good enough for Messerschmitt, and they took us on the train, a request to work for the Messerschmitt worker. So we came to Bavaria. Once we came in there, they opened up. It was August. After 2 days being in the train without food, nobody was able to walk out. They start pouring water at us. And after a while, we got out walking. And as we start walking to the concentration camp, all of a sudden in the nearby, getting close, we're smelling the crematorium, we're smelling the thing. And then you think to yourself, gee, in 1943, there were crematorium, 44 crematorium, and now you're again with that smell and so on. And we came there, and what fortunately no Messerschmitt was requiring the people. We're shaving, we're getting some food. In the coffee, they put drugs to give you the go-go, so you were going strong to work and so on. And we were working till April 1945, which was just about the end of the war. The general pattern with the Third Army was very, very rapidly increasing in Bavaria. And we could even hear the artillery at night. And then one morning, everybody did get a small loaf of bread, which was very surprisingly. And we heard already that the Red Cross from Sweden is outside. And they build up that not to worry, everything's going to be all right. And the first thing is all the Jews on the Appelplatz, they were going to be exchanged for the prisoner of war of Germans who are in, by the Russians or by the British or by the American. I mean, the big lie and so on. But at that particular time, you had that loaf of bread and you were completely exhausted and probably drugged from what the things they give you to drink. You just believed in it, and you wanted to believe that the Swedish people were going to save you there, and this is the end, and so on. We walked out, we marched out of the camp, and got on a train, and it was very difficult because the United States Army, Air Force, and the British Air Force was constantly flying over. So every time they were flying over, the train was hiding the locomotive not to get hurt. And that was going on like this for a couple of hours till we came to a place, Schwarzenfeld. And over there, the locomotive was getting filled up with water. While this thing happened, 2 American planes came down and they start strafing the plane, the train, with all the Jews inside. And it was terrible, terrible. All of a sudden, it's like hell. And I ran out, I lay down behind the wheel because I figured the wheels of the train are steel. If they're gonna hurt, then maybe that will protect you, which was even the right way of thinking. And after the planes left, we had to start pulling out the deads. That was only a Jewish transport with 133 people. We put them up all together on the pile, and they start beating us up into 5. Let's walk. And we start walking, and from far we still listen. They shot into the pile of the hurt people, of the dead people, to make it sure that everybody's there. And we start walking. After a while, rain started, and that was a great help for us, because in some of the columns later, when the people were walking, They had no rain, they had no water, and they were dying from thirst. We were the fortune walking in the rain, and since we all had the little caps like a beret, the moment that got wet, we start squeezing the dirt water from the thing and uh, having a few drops of fluid, and we kept walking. At one occasion, or maybe even two occasions, I recollect, not on the same day, we came to the same place, because once we came down on the lawn, when they came down on the grounds, everybody lay down on the stomach, and like the little sheep, we start eating the green grass or piece of wood, whatever it was. And then we went up to the corners of where they had already some Germans, all the Germans, because the SS was running away, and they were there with making them so fire, but they were walking with us. So they got us the sticks of wood, the charcoal. We were eating those pieces of wood, the charcoal and the water, and that was our thing for the week to go. As we came closer to the fields where the farmers seen us walking by, they wanted to have as soon as possible to get away from the vicinity. So they came with buckets of hot potatoes, and they start throwing them in toward exit from this, to go faster out of the place and continue walking. So you kept walking, and you picked up the potato. You shared the potato with the 4 people walking with you. And like for 2 days, for 3 days, that's all what we had. We had a potato with the charcoal wooden sticks, and we had the water. We were pretty glad. We started from Florida, from Flossenburg, I think on the 15th or on the 16th, and that was the 22nd now. And we're walking on the road in the direction of the concentration camp Dachau. Now, from the south toward north, there was no more traffic, so they put us on the left side of the road, because on the other side, there were still cars running away, of Germans and so on. And that was a great help, because the guards were walking on the left side, and the right side was rather open. So I still was with a few of my friends, and we said, gee, we're going to continue walking. We're just going to die because we're losing the strength. Let's just, for the next possibility, we've seen from far away, we've seen there's some farmer houses and so on. I said, we're going to give it a try. And we walked off the road into they were like, from on the road, there was a groove for the water, for the rain. We had a hard time from the groove to get up on the fields. And little by little, you can imagine, after 5 days without hardly in the wooden shoes, walking the field, we started as fast as possible with the less strength, work toward the farmhouse. As we came nearby to the house, then old farmer came out, and he's seen us. So one of my friends, he screamed in Jewish, "Ich verbrenne die Scheune." It's documented. He's in Canada, and he made that statement many years ago. And the farmer was afraid that he's going to burn him down the place. He said, come on. we came in there, sat down on the floor, fully exhausted, And he brought us milk in a big, and we start drinking because we're exhausted. And while I was drinking that, and then you heard the tanks on the cobblestone road, going. So the last strength, you just didn't have any more strength and so on. I just blacked out and was out. When I came to myself, when I woke me up, I was in an ambulance of the United States Army, already uncovered. They took off my pajama pants because under the pajama pants, I made myself from cement bags with wire against the cold, because it was very cold, and against the snow. It was good against the cold and snow, but it wasn't good for 5 days walking in the rain. So the wire thing, they open up all my both sides of the legs, and the pajama pants, they were red and so on. So I was one of the fortunate. When the army saved me, they took me up, they put the pants out. My both legs were open, but not just from the wires and so on. And there were a lot of doctors who were German Jews who came to United States. They ran away. They were in the army, and some of them, they start talking and good, and so on. And I got wired for intravenous, and I was laying there up on the table because there was no more fighting with German army. The pattern was just rolling there because they were running before him. And I came with that company. The first 3-4 days, I was just fully exhausted. You can imagine that. When I finally had the first opportunity to say where I am, we were in Czechoslovakia. And that was already May, and the war ended. So since this was a fighting group of the 3rd Army General Patton, they were immediately replaced by the upcoming other soldiers. And the group where I was, they were called back toward the French border for debarkation back to the United States. So they took me up to the French border, and it brought me into a hospital. I was in a hospital at the German border there for quite a while. They sign up, the doctors, they sign up with the names and so on. And after that, took some time, so I was able to walk and get up. You can imagine the traumatic experiences and the fear which you had through all those years, and all of a sudden you're ending up as a young guy there, you in a German town surrounded just by millions of Nazis. Can you imagine, So the first thing what I said to myself, I'm going to make my way to Frankfurt am Main, And that's what I did, because Frankfurt am Main, I knew I was a Oberstein, the little place. So little by little, on the trains, in the direction, and we're talking now already, the wars, this June, July, August. So they start the first trains running in Germany, but you know, it's all freight and so on. So you just took a train, and many times it took the wrong direction. So instead of going to Frankfurt, I went up. But anyhow, I made it to Frankfurt. I made it back to Bavaria. And since I heard that the Russians are in Germany and they're not so nice about it, I figured to go back to Poland, you go to Czechoslovakia just the way you came. And that's exactly what I did. It took a long, long time. I came to Prague, to China, and the Czech people were very, very nice to me and very, very helpful. And through Bratislava, I came to the border of Poland. From there, I came to Krakow. And at that particular time, in every larger town, there was already Jewish committees of survivors with names. And I was looking for names and nothing till I came to Warsaw. When I came in Warsaw, they had already the list of lodge. And then I see the name of my mother and my sister as a survivor. So I came to lodge.
Very relieving.
That was relieving. But these old things took a long time. The moment I came to lodge, there were Russians there, and it wasn't like before. Like the Polish people couldn't care more or less about the survivor. They couldn't care about the Jew. Like it was very unfriendly and so on. So I said to my mother that we're not staying in Poland. It comes Christmas time that everybody is drinking at the border and so on. We're going to go in the direction to the American zone in Germany. Meanwhile, we heard they have a displaced persons camps in UNRWA and so on. So we came with my mother and my sister. We came to Berlin. From Berlin, we came to another displaced person camp. We stayed there a few years, although we had immediately the visa to come to the United States, because from Danzig there was nobody there anymore, and we were on a Danzig quota. But I worked in a camp, and I worked with the Hashomer Tzair, so I believe that I have to do my work first. And we established a kibbutz there and everything, all documentation. And I stayed there till the end. The camp was closed. And then we came to the States. We came to the States 10 days on a Liberty ship. And we landed up in New York. Of course, the people who signed for you to come, they were not there. The apartment was not there. The job was not there. It was only Hayas. They took us, fortunately, and then the new Americans. And we got a room. The nice part that, sleep on the couch. And 1, 2, 3, since the three of us went to work, my mother and my sister, they made $60 together. I was 32, so $92. 1950 was a lot of money for a week. That was a lot of money for a week. So,
You made the best of it.
We made the best of it, yes. We worked, and things were inexpensive. We got the apartment. Was on the one on the third floor. Mine was on the fourth floor. Rent control. So my sister did get married to a Hungarian Holocaust survivor, and I did get married, and we were just feeling great. New life, America. And Nobody sent us to the doctor. Nobody sent us for the traumatic experience. Nobody gave us anything, just keep going. And if there was a bill to pay, they paid the little bills and so on. Then it was a very great help, which we got from the Jewish community in New York. I'm talking about our family. I got married, and of course, with the knowledge of machinery work, I was able to get into a trade which was paying good. And since in Europe we have the millimeters, and in the America you have the what you call it now, it's much larger. So no, they don't use centimeters. They're using a different, much larger thing. They took me in, and I was able to settle down. And the first thing what I then decided is to continue also use school. Now here you have somebody that was 56. Let's say 56. Let's say I'm 28 years old, and I went to evening school, adult evening education school, and I made all the required tests for the teachers of things which I have learned with my father. Can you imagine, at the age of 6, 7? So that was not destroyed. Lot of things with the traumatic experiences has destroyed me completely. Until today, even I'm not able to get it over with. But I was able to finish the high school. I get the graduation, and I start going to City College in New York City. And the first thing when I took abnormal psychology to find out what makes you tick. And then the next thing I did, taxation and corporation, because a lot of people from our newcomers from various camps and so on, by little, they already settled and had little businesses and so on. I was making for them the bookkeeping, and I became the financial advisor. And my daughter was born. I was 30 years old. 3 years later, my son was born. And for a moment, things were going pretty good. And I still cannot recollect what triggered it off. All of a sudden, at night, started the nightmare of my experience of the war. And screams, hallucination. So they took me there to people who was also survivors, and they're gonna do. So they start giving me Prozac, they start giving me this, they start giving me that. The more they gave me, the worse the thing got. It did get so bad that I realized that if I stay any longer, I'm going to destroy everything. And I said to, I cannot help myself. I just don't want to be a burden. And separated from my wife and my children. I was working and drugged. So people came up and said, listen, here in the States, there's not too much, help. There are many, many people with traumatic experiences go to Israel. Perhaps there you'll be able to. So in 1979, I made the Aliyah and I came by myself here. I came and immediately with the knowledge of languages, they took me to the hotel. I was working a reception and counting and whatever it is, and met somebody, married and lived in New York, in Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv, yes. Little by little, I met people with the same lettering KL, which I have on my right hand, and buying from the butcher. He was one. So meeting those people and so on, I didn't go to any doctors and so on, but worked on myself till I decided, I said, look, I'm for the early retirement, because I was entitled to the Social Security from the United States, which was much, much larger than my pays in Israel. So I said, I have to commemorate the event of the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. And I started to paint gouache. I never took painting up before. And I figured, well, it's going to be a big thing. So I bought the cartons that's 70 on meter. Some of them you people have there. I don't know if they're actually the same size. And I used the color exact one from the tube on the carton and without painting, just pushing on and getting the things. I worked at night in the hotel, so the daytime I had the time, and I did the paintings. Start painting. Neighbors start coming and they said, oh, awful, awful, awful. Some of the ladies, I said, more than awful. I said, I have something going there. And it was a nice little house, about 16 people, like 3.5 story high. And nice people, all nice people. Some of them were still Holocaust survivors, some of people. And I had very fortunate to win. The doors were open. I had a half a floor higher. I had a musician who played the cello, and the music was just beautiful. So listening to the music and using my spattle, I would say one thing, his music just mixed the color, like, was fantastic. And I'm very thankful. That's it. At this lovely person, he is today the professor of music in Carolina, in the University of Carolina. God bless you. God bless you.
Thank you all for coming today and hearing Michael's
Yes,
amazing.
He's honored. He's honored. He was at the museum too with the wife. The first thing what they did, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And like I said, with the music, and it helped me. I start doing once I had my first exhibit, people came by there and I start talk like I'm telling you people the story. And before you know, they took me with the education ministry. I went about 4 or 5 times with Israeli students to all those camps. Can you imagine? I went back, but after my paintings and after having already the lectures here, I just continue more, you know, as a being there. Of course, when I came back, it took me 2-3 days with fever, then over with, but going there and telling the young people and so on, it gave me a certain relief and so on. I done that, well, in Germany. I done that in the United States. My paintings were in the Holocaust Museum in Florida. I went there about eight times or so on. And now it came to Carolina, and this is something very special. I might only say one more thing. When I went to school at the age of 6 in Danzig, my school was located on Karolinengasse. Karolinengasse. Can you imagine that? I mean, I was just thinking about it. So something was so beautiful, because there's what else can happen to a guy about 97 here in assisted living is. But thanks to Diane, with Annie, and all of you people that you made it exhibit, and that I was able to see it still, you know.
Yeah, and I also want to add, it's really important for us because it
Sure.
might be Micha's one of his few last exhibits.
Sure.
And thank you all for coming today and
Sure.
listening to Micha's his stories. And
at the time, they discussing to connect it to the Warsaw Heritage Museum, and also in New York City. But as I see it, Sumter is the last stop for me. And people, I am really happy that to see it, that it was there. And
then thank you in Sumter for
That's
helping us.
that's right.
For
Setting up the
for
Zoom.
setting up the Zoom and everything, and
Sure.
contacting us. And yeah, you did a great work.
That's right.
Thank you.
By the way, you know, you have on the exposition, on the first exposition with the rabbi and everything, it's on the internet. It's also in English. There are a lot of things in English. If Amit will be sending you and so on. And look, I only can say one thing. Thanks a lot. And God bless you all. And Gabi, Emmanuel.
Thank
from
you.
far away, God
Michael.
bless you.
Bye bye.
Bye. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, all of you.
Thank you.
Bye.
It was wonderful.
Thank you, Michael. Chris.